What's up, everybody? Welcome into the Next Pats podcast. I'm Phil Perry, coming at you from Radio Row in New Orleans. We have another great episode lined up for you. Here today, we're talking to both Thomas Dimitroff and Ross Tucker, a couple of great football minds after we gave you a couple of great football minds in the previous Next Pats edition with both Lindsay Rhodes and Sean Syed from SumerSports. Talked some Senior Bowl with them, talked some Super Bowl and Super Bowl rosters in particular, and how the Patriots might be able to approach their roster rebuild by looking at these teams that remain here in New Orleans playing for the Lombardi Trophy. But here today, we want to talk about the receiver spot with Dimitroff. We want to talk about the offensive line with Ross Tucker. Unbelievable people to talk to on both of these topics. And before we get to those conversations, I do have to bring up one name in particular who would fulfill one of those needs for the New England Patriots if they were able to acquire him this offseason, and that's Cooper Kupp from the LA Rams. He announced on Monday night that he would be traded this offseason by the Rams. Not his call, the team's call. He's 31 years old. He's been banged up. He's due about $20 million in real money next season alone. $12.5 million in base salary, $7.5 in a roster bonus that is due to him in March. That's a significant chunk of change for a guy who's at the stage of his career that Cooper Kupp is at. A decent ways removed from 2021 when he had one of the best wide receiver seasons of all time. But now that he's available, should the Patriots be interested? And I would say yes, 1,000 times yes. I understand where he's at and where the Patriots' organizational trajectory lines up right now is not necessarily a perfect match, in that by the time the Patriots are good enough to compete for championships, Cooper Kupp might be retired. And yet, I still believe the Patriots should pursue him because he's exactly what they need right now, which is a professional in that receiver room. Not only would he help Drake May and be a security blanket for Drake May in obvious passing situations, 3rd and 8, where are you looking? Middle of the field, Cooper Kupp. You know he's going to be open. You know he's going to be dependable as long as he's healthy and he's on the field. So not only would he help your young quarterback as he tries to make a year 1 to year 2 kind of leap, he also is the kind of player who could help the other receivers in that receiver room raise their overall level of professionalism by watching what he does on a day-to-day basis, in meetings, on the practice field, on game days. You can't tell me that wouldn't help somebody like a Pop Douglas. You can't tell me that wouldn't help somebody like a Jalen Polk, as the Patriots, we think, will try to resurrect his career after a really rough rookie season as he goes into year 2 as a second-round pick. They're not necessarily going to give up on him as soon as he walks through the door. Having somebody like Cooper Kupp around? Oh, by the way, Cooper Kupp and Kendrick Bourne played college football together at Eastern Washington. So there's another player maybe he could impact, though in a different way, because Bourne obviously is a veteran. He's seen a lot of football, but maybe there's a positive impact there as well. I just feel as though he's the kind of player, if you're able to bring him in, he has a domino effect on others in that room, and specifically on the offensive side of the ball. He would fit in with Josh McDaniels. We know McDaniels helped revolutionize the slot receiver position in the aughts, the 2010s. Wes Welker, Danny Amendola, Julian Edelman. He would have a clearly defined role. He would operate in that area of the football field where Drake May was one of the best young prospects coming out in terms of the college data that we had, in terms of attacking the middle of the field between the hashes, between the numbers. That's somebody that would be able to maximize one of Drake May's strengths. Would you be able to fit him in financially? I think there's a chance that the Rams will be eating some money in this deal, because now that it's out there and it's in the open that Kupp's about to be dealt, the Rams don't have a lot of leverage. And so if they want to get the most from a trade partner in a deal, they might have to be willing to eat some cash here. So what is the trade compensation? Is it a 3rd-round pick? Is it more than that? Hard for me to believe it would be much more than that, just given, again, where Kupp is at this point in his career, the fact that he has been banged up the last few seasons. He's finished the last few seasons dealing with nagging injuries. And so I think he's going to be there for the Patriots. The question is he going to want to come to the Patriots? If they have the money to pay him, if they have the draft capital to send to the LA Rams, is he going to want to go to the Northeast? Is he going to want to come to a team that is still a ways away from building its roster to a point where they are championship contenders? Because, again, at this point in his career, you would think Cooper Kupp, he won a Super Bowl 3 years ago. He's going to want to try to win another one, and that's not a realistic situation here in New England. So that's the one major hurdle, in my opinion, to getting him here. But if the Patriots want to, they should be making that call. We talked last episode, about how, yes, of course, the Patriots should be calling on Myles Garrett. The same is true here with Cooper Kupp, though for different reasons. Garrett is that guy who changes your team. He gives you a blue chip type of talent who is, yes, he's 29 years old. Not necessarily going to play forever. But of course you should be calling on him. Of course you should be calling on Cooper Kupp because of some of the other impacts that he can make on your team. And, oh, by the way, he would suddenly become your most dependable receiver at a premium position. And if you can't get T. Higgins, we're going to talk about this with Thomas Dimitroff, if you can't spend that money to get the guy who's the consensus best free agent on the market across positions, then maybe adding somebody like Cooper Kupp via trade would be the next best thing. All right, let's get to our two conversations here. Again, Ross Tucker on the offensive line. We're going to get Thomas Dimitroff on receivers and a variety of other topics. You may have already heard the Dimitroff conversation on the Patriots Talk podcast. If you did, that's great. Scroll on ahead to the Ross Tucker interview, and you're going to enjoy the hell out of that as well. I just figured we really should include that Dimitroff conversation on Next Pats because it's all roster building. Any chance we get to sit down with a general manager type of person, obviously accomplished executive for the New England Patriots, accomplished executive for the Atlanta Falcons. He interviewed for 2 different general manager jobs this past offseason, both the Jets and the Titans. What a tremendous resource for us here on the Next Pats podcast where we are so focused on team building. So here's Thomas Dimitroff, and then you're going to have a little bit of a break, and then you're going to hear me come back with Ross Tucker. We're going to talk some football. We're going to talk some Valentine's Day. You're going to love that conversation. But first, here's Thomas.
Hey, what's up, everybody? We're going to bring in now Thomas Dimitroff, former Patriots executive, former Atlanta Falcons executive, now with SumerSports. We've talked to him many times in the past. Welcome in.
Great to be here. One of my highlights is stopping by here talking golf with you. Not necessarily everything else that's going on in the world, but thanks.
I'll have you fixed right up. It'll only take 45, hour, 15, really however long you have. He's willing to talk to you.
It's going to be a big expenditure, too, by the end of it.
Yeah, I get that 100%. I expect to see golf underneath the sports shirt there, whatever, like golf expert or something.
I already looked for, there's a Bayou Country Club here in town. It's 5,900 yards, so it's kind of executive.
Top golf situations here?
No, there's a Top Golf that's under construction and also a 504 Golf under construction. They could have done a better job and gotten those things ready earlier, but they're probably on kind of a southern schedule, and it didn't happen.
All right, we should talk some football with this guy. He's only got so much time. He's a very busy man. Thomas, I want to ask you first what you think of Bill Belichick. Going to North Carolina, starting a new career path into his 70s here. What did you make of that when he took that North Carolina job?
When it happened, I thought, tell me is this really happening? It was surprising, like everyone, right? And I think the world of him as a talent, of course, and he's one of the best ever, all that. We don't need to go into that. You guys know that very publicly. I do think that the recruiting side of it is going to be massively important. He doesn't even need to be the talkative guy, right? He can get on the phone with the uncle for 30 seconds and tell him how he's going to make the kid the best he can be, possibly a pro. It's going to be great. Well, I have a lot of ties in North Carolina, interestingly enough. My wife's side is really heavily there, boosters, et cetera, so I'm wondering if I can get a shirt out of it or not, but who knows? All I know, I'm being facetious, is I think he's going to do a really good job with the program. How long will he stay? I'm sure you guys wonder.
Yeah, I do wonder. Do you think that he still will covet an opportunity to come back to the NFL? I mean, it was reported that he reached out to even the Jets before deciding to move ahead with the North Carolina job. So you look at that and you're like, he still would be more satisfied, it would think, even though he calls North Carolina his dream job, being in the NFL.
Yeah, look, I think there are so many benefits about being in the NCAA and working at in North Carolina. I'm sure Bubba Cunningham probably was, oh my gosh, as the AD, this guy's coming in with a really strong hand at a lot of levels. How is this going to play out as far as ADs are navigating that, right, with all the big names they're bringing in. He obviously has the ability to turn it around quickly. That will happen. Back to your point. I've always thought that he wanted to, do what he needs to do as far as the history of wins, et cetera, et cetera. That's what I thought. He's a historian, right? Every time I hear him talking about something, even the Carolina job, right? He was bringing up some history there. Yep. I think that's important to him. So that's why I thought he might want to come back one day.
We should ask you because you've sat in that seat before as general manager. And because you interviewed for the general manager job with the Jets, which we need to ask you about as well. But if you were in that seat with some organization right now in the NFL, would you be calling Bill Belichick to interview for a head coaching job if you needed to fill that position?
I think anyone out there that's looking for a position and they know that they can they can go in with a guy that has that much experience and they're not intimidated by it. I think, quite honestly, it could happen with a second-time general manager getting an opportunity, to your point, who's not worried about shining and making his name in the NFL as having, that's always a big and sort of insecure thing when you're a first-time general manager, right? You're like, I really want to go in there and make my own, have my own stamp on it all. I think the people that are going there thinking, I need to turn this organization around. This guy could turn it around, quickly, I believe. I was surprised last year that things didn't work out that way for him.
Speaking of GMs, speaking of head coaches, the Patriots now have a setup with Mike Vrabel coming back as their head coach. First, your impressions on him as a hire. Second time around, I always think that that's a benefit when you have a head coach you're getting in his second go-round because he understands where some of the landmines are. But that delicate balance between head coach, personnel, and even holdover personnel, which Eliot Wolf is for the Patriots, how difficult is that to navigate, and what are some of the pitfalls you want to avoid?
Well, there's a lot there in that question, right? Because, I think Mike Vrabel, second time around. By the way, can't you trumpet second time around for GMs, please?
I've tried.
This is just not happening, right? It's unbelievable. But second time, I agree with you. I agree with you on Vrabes. I mean, obviously, he's a very talented coach. What he's gonna hold that team accountable. Of course, there's so many things that are going to be beneficial. What you just mentioned, however, I don't mean it to be negative, is how is that going to operate with Eliot, and then with Ryan Cowden? I think they're both really good football guys. They know scouting very well. I hope that works out well for them. But I feel like with Mike in charge of that, he's not going to let it get away from him, right? Mm-hmm. Where there's battling in any way with two executive, personnel execs. I think that's a big thing. Team of teams, I'm a big believer in that. Get the right people around you, get the right coordinators around you. Have you guys already assigned? Did they already sign the coordinators?
They have.
Yes.
So it's Josh McDaniels and Terrell Williams on the defensive side.
I love that Josh is back in there. I mean, I think I don't throw around the word genius much at all. I think per offense, I mean, Josh is on top of it. We all know that, and I just think it's a great hire for Vrabes to have him in there.
If you were Eliot Wolf, how would you be feeling right now? Just as one of those carryover people, Mike Vrabel's bringing in a guy that he has a relationship with. It sounds like Vrabel and Wolf are getting along just fine, but they don't really have that working relationship that a lot of head coaches and head personnel people have. So how would you feel if you were in his shoes?
Yeah, I mean, look, Eliot Wolf comes from a long, history of football with his dad being a famous Hall of Fame, builder. So he understands that. It's not comfortable. Call it the way it is, especially in those early times, right? When you're kind of paired with someone, kind of or kind of not, whatever it is, you're hoping that you can work together. And Eliot's got a personality that I think can work with most people. That's my take. So I'm sure, but it's still a little uneasy. You don't know how. You don't know how that's going to be. Are you going to be moved to the side more? Are there going to be conversations? And this is what's tough sometimes. What happens if the conversations come when Vrabel is talking with Ryan Cowden, just the two of them?
Right.
You're just naturally feeling a little bit of angst there, and that's something that you have to learn to deal with. And sometimes that means it's good. I'm going to stay here. And other times it means this is let's start thinking about where my next move is.
One of the biggest moves that they're going to have to make in decisions is what they're going to do at number 4. They end up there after winning their final game of the season, drop from 1 to 4. What's this draft look like? I mean, last year was a bonanza. If you were in the top 5, that's great, especially if you were a quarterback needy. Boom, you got it done. This year, is it a little bit more muddied?
Yeah, I think it's muddy, dusty, maybe not as muddy, maybe more dusty, because I do think that top 5, like if you're Tennessee, another team that I interviewed with, I mean, by the way, I think they were going to go young all the way anyway because of the way they were setting things up. But I was daydreaming about being in that number 1 spot. That's not an easy spot to be in this year if you're looking for a quarterback. Does Shadur Sanders and Cam Ward have talent? No question. But are they the talent that you want to knock off, pick one overall? That's a tough thing. So New England's 4, right? Is
4, yep.
4? I mean, I think there are some great pass rushers out there. This is a really good pass rush year. I think that's good. I think there are some really good offensive linemen. There are some cool tackles in this draft. I also think it's not that. I mean, I'm a huge believer in tight ends, and I would tell. I mean, for Drake, we did it with Matt Ryan, right? The next year after we drafted Matt Ryan, we traded for Tony Gonzalez. It was one of the picks or the acquisitions that I made personally that I was proud of because it helped Matt Ryan develop so much. I would put together a great tandem of tight ends in there, high percentage shot, get that cat rolling. Really good, short, intermediate. Drop in the deep ones. We know he can do it. Help him develop. Gives confidence. I think it's a great thing.
I'm curious because you've got access to so much great data at Sumer, right? And you guys can look at the game in a way that's different for most of us. Is there a safe pick at the top of the draft anymore in terms of position? Because I feel like back in the day it used to be you would see a tackle, and if that guy was the right kind of guy, you knew he was going to be a 10-year pro, whereas it feels a little more uncertain at the offensive line now, and maybe things like receiver have become a little bit more certain. So I'm curious as to your take, having sat in that seat and having all the data that you do have.
Yeah, look, thanks for the little bit of a Sumer plug there. I would say, yeah, look, I still think that offensive tackle is still one that would sway towards thinking it's a nice shot. Well, back in the day, we never would have thought about an interior O-lineman there as well. I think now that's one of those situations, if it's legit, that 8 to 10 to 12 area can be. I'm not saying it was top 5. I get that. The receiver thing, I mean, look, I've been a part of one that I thought was one of the best to have played for a while before he obviously had injuries, and I think Julio Jones is a first ballot. That was a huge move to move up and do that. There are just positions that have changed over the years. We never would have taken tight ends in the first round.
Mm-hmm.
I'm coming back to tight end. I know I'm beating the drum on
I'm
this.
with you. I'm huge. Build the whole plane out of tight ends.
Right. I mean, I look at those guys sometimes when I'm on the field. I'm like, they're big, they're tall, and now the combination F and Y, I just think that combination and versatility to be able to do both is amazing without getting off on a tangent there. So I think there are a number of positions that are still tried and true, but there aren't exact. The biggest one, I wish that was more of a sure bet, is the pass rusher. There are a lot of mistakes made on pass rushers like quarterbacks, and that's because, and I'll raise my hand on Vic Beasley, for instance. Look, beautiful, ripped up, athletic, no party guy, great guy. He just lacked the true passion that we needed to take it contract to contract. And so what I'm saying is there are mistakes on that position which are unfortunate.
I wanted to ask you about your opportunity to interview for a couple of different general manager jobs this year. And specifically, the one that we're focused on is the one in the AFC East with the Jets. What did you make of the process there for the Jets? And do you feel like there is real change coming there for the roster? And I'm thinking specifically a quarterback in New York in terms of what their wants and desires are, as much as you could share with us that you heard during that process.
Yeah, look, I went there, and I went there interviewing with, as you know, with Woody Johnson and Christopher Johnson, as well as with Jaime Elhai, one of the best presidents out there. He's a really talented guy. And then, as you know, Rick Spielman and Mike Tannenbaum, right? They were the heading up the search. And by the way, it's always an interesting thing when you're interviewing with your peers, right? It's another great conversation that I would love Mike and Rick to be here and talk about, because it's not, that's always an interesting thing. I thought they were looking for veteran. I thought they were going to look for a veteran at the GM spot and the head coaching spot. That's why I wanted to interview, right?
Yep.
Because I thought this ended up being, in my mind, synonymous with the Falcons situation. When I took that job in 2008, it was coming off the Michael Vick debacle, and I thought, raise my hand when I go into interview. Like, if you're looking for a resurrection and you're looking for a rebuild, the experience is there. Whether it's with me or someone else has done that, that's a big thing to have a past in doing that. And I thought that's a big part. I think the Jets weren't in anywhere near as bad of a place as Atlanta was when we went in there in 2008 with myself and Mike Smith. So my point is, I think there's a heck of a roster. I think there are some really good football players. I thought Joe Douglas, unfortunately for him, I get it, but Joe put some good football players in there, and now they missed on some like we all do, right? I just think now that organization, and I'm happy for Darren Muji. I know Muji is, he's a 39-year-old, I think. Is he 39, I think? 39-year-old taking that over. Big city, there's a lot going on, but he's a tough guy. He's got an edge to him. I think it's going to be good. They have a good football coach there. Obviously, 2 first-timers in that role. They're going to have to be very mindful how they navigate that. But I'm confident that they can get it done. You guys don't want to hear that.
No, but it's interesting because you look at the landscape of the AFC East, and that's what I was going to ask you. The Patriots don't have a talented roster. They have a quarterback. They have a head coach, I think, with a vision. They have a top-tier corner. They have an owner who's extremely motivated, because I think that he's, at this point, embarrassed about the way things have gone, based somewhat on some of the decisions he made or failed to make. So all those things in place, is that enough for a team to improve drastically when you don't have a lot of talent, but you do have that key spot quarterback and the head coach with a vision?
Yeah, look, I think there are building blocks. Start with the head coach. I would say that all the time. When I was talking about ever coming back, in my mind, one of the things that was on my mind was, who would I trade for as a head coach? Because it is such a vital hire. Are you talking about, I don't even get the names because I'll get calls from the organizations.
Sure.
But there are 3 guys out there probably that I would 100% get on the table to trade for. My point is to make sure you have a bona fide, legitimate head coach who's going to run things the right way and be strong about it and hold people accountable. That's a big thing. And to have a quarterback and a head coach, that's a great place to build. Yes, there are a number of holes there. You guys have a lot of work to be done, but you're at a spot in the draft. I think your salary cap, what's your space right now?
Ton.
Most in the league.
Yeah, that's what I thought it was, most in the league. Right, so most in the league, but you have the needs. Offensive line, where did you guys rank on the offensive line side? I mean,
Probably worse in the
32.
league.
Complicated, yeah. And so I think you got to build through the trenches, both sides, I'm sure. I think that's going to be a big thing, and I think they can do that. But I think you have to be creative. I also think you have to go in, and back to your point, you have to decide where you're going to spend your money in free agency, right? Because you can do it. What I used to love doing is going into the draft knowing I had 3 or 4 positions in free agency taken care of. It takes so much pressure off the idea of trying to pull it all together in the draft when you just have so much inconsistency and uncertainty.
I love picking your brain on this stuff. The last thing I wanted to ask you is about free agency, because I've heard you talk in the past about the mistakes that can be made when you force a need, right? And so whether it's the offensive line for the Patriots or receiver for the Patriots, there's some clear and obvious needs there. The best free agent on the market, according to a lot of people who look at this stuff, is T. Higgins. Is that a guy that you would, quote-unquote, force it with because the need is so great in New England, even though you might be paying him near the top of the receiver market? He's a good player. I don't know if he's that kind of player. Is that the kind of move you'd be comfortable with as a general manager?
The talent, no question about it. It is a position that I really struggle with. You know, we brought in guys like Mohamed Sanu that were, you guys had him there a little bit too,
Yep.
that were, a little bit more down the line. When you're paying the marquee guy and you're having to rip that check out to be like the biggest number, that's complicated. He's a guy that could help turn it around for sure. I am a big believer. I always put the tools around your quarterback. We did it with Michael Turner way back in the day. We did it with Tony Gonzalez. We did it with Julio Jones. We were always mindful of what we put around Matt Ryan in those formative years. I think it's vital you do that. But to spend the money on T, is he worth it? He's the best. I love what he does, but I don't know if it's worth doing that with your organization. I think there's other areas that you can put your money into. You can go in the draft, have a nice solid pick in the draft. I do believe that as well. Instead.
Is it last question now, just off of that? Because the money has increased so drastically in the last few years, when you see free agents now, all the positions are rising quickly. You bring in a guy like T. Higgins, and to convince him to come to New England, he might have to be at $40 million to come to New England. I know it's way more than Justin Jefferson, but he'll say, in 2 years, this is going to be obsolete. I want $40 million if you want me to come here. How does that upset a locker room? Or not upset it, but how does that impact the locker room when you're like, that guy makes more than 3 times what our best players make?
It's a really big deal. And look, when we signed Julio Jones to $22 million, the world lost their mind. Thomas, you've lost your mind. What are you doing? Can you imagine? So here we are. But Julio was outspoken about saying he should make what the quarterback, why is he exponentially less than Matt Ryan? So I'm bringing this back to you guys. You bring in a guy like that that's making closer to the quarterback number. It might feel right for a lot of the people out there when they're talking about true talent.
Yep.
Because what's the top quarterback making 55 or on our way
Pushing
to 60?
60, yeah.
So we might be moving in that direction. I will be interested to see who does, pull the trigger on T. Higgins, because he could turn an organization around. I do believe that.
Good deal.
Can we ask Thomas a jumbo gumbo question?
Oh,
you wanna
yeah,
do that?
I forgot to do-
We got to
yeah,
do that.
yeah. Oh,
this
my
is
God.
this is our fun little bit right here. You get to ladle out a football, and the football is going to have a number, and the number is going to give us a question that is completely off the beaten path. It's number 29.
Oh, Eric Dickerson.
LeGarrette Blount coming at you, Thomas Dimitroff. Ooh, this is a good one, because we were just talking about golf clubs and the money that might have to get spent on golf clubs for all of us this offseason. What is a splurge purchase that you don't regret? Could be any point in your life. Splurge purchase that you don't regret.
It was probably my prize mountain bike. Which
I knew
was
it was
the
going to be
lightest
the bike.
Yeah, no, it had to be a bike, right? It was it's a S-Works a mountain bike, and it's lighter than probably most road bikes out there. I'm an avid cyclist, so it was that. I don't use it enough, and my kids look at me every time I get on them about money. They're like, Papa, serious. I'm looking at your wine cellar. I'm looking at your garage here with 12 bikes here. What are you doing? So I'm kind of in a little bit of a bind, but that's what I do.
We're not going to ask you how much it was either.
No, please don't.
No, we wouldn't do
Not
that here.
doing it.
We would not do that. Very excited now to have with us Ross Tucker, host of the Ross Tucker Football Podcast, at Ross Tucker NFL on social media. And you're here to talk to us about myfrontpagestory.com, Ross.
Well,
I want to hear everything about this.
Listen, I told you about it last year. It's my buddy's company. It's by far the best Valentine's Day gift ever. You talk to a writer for 10 minutes while you're driving to Dunkin' Donuts or driving home from work. They write the most incredible story about your wife or significant other, whoever. It looks like it's on the cover of the newspaper, framed, beautiful. The key, Phil, being able to say to your wife, honey, I want to do something special for you. So I had a story written about you. That just sounds amazing. When she reads the quotes, like I never thank her enough, everything she does for me and the family, they cry almost every. It's like next-gen stats, 92% cry rate. MyFrontPageStory.com. Trust me, don't blow it for Valentine's Day again this year. MyFrontPageStory.com.
MyFrontPageStory.com. This is fantastic because I know, Ross, as somebody who wrote high school sports for a long time before I started covering the New England Patriots,
Nice.
that if you see yourself in a newspaper sort of format, picture, words, and it's
People
all
love
about
it.
you. People love it, and they eat it up, and their families want it, and they want to hang it up on the wall. And we used to clean up on high school sports, the entire paper, because that's why people would buy the paper. And you're saying you can do this, you can personalize it for your significant other, give them exactly what they're looking for.
Yes, and just side note real quick, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, I was like the sports writer for my school newspaper because our school was 7 through 12. And then like 11th and 12th grade, it got real awkward because I couldn't be asking myself the question. So Ross, how did you have 28 points last night?
Ross, way
Good
to
question,
dominate
Ross.
there.
Yeah. So, anyway, speaking of dominating, let's talk about the Patriots.
Yeah, let's talk about the Patriots' offensive line. Totally dominant. You had the opportunity to see the Patriots up close and
Yeah, a
personal
couple
multiple times over the course of the 2024 season. Just how far do they have to go to get back to having a product that Patriots fans can actually enjoy watching, in your opinion?
Well, so that's an interesting question. I honestly, by the way, I feel like I'm bad luck because before I did the Cardinals game, they played the Colts, and they played pretty well in that game. You know, like they should have won that game.
They should have.
Then I did the Cardinals game, and they laid an egg. Then before the Chargers game that Saturday on NFL Network, they played the Bills. They easily could have won in Buffalo. So both times I was like, okay, he's got to go in the right direction. And then when I do the game, they laid an egg against the Chargers. I said this during the Chargers game, and I don't know, it got attention, but they had arguably the worst offensive line in the league and arguably the worst receiving core in the league. And I wasn't saying that to hurt anybody's feelings. It's just that, again, arguably, I'm not saying they were the worst, but they were bad. I'm just telling you, dude, like we're here for the Super Bowl. I don't know if you got the chance to see any of the Eagles offensive linemen last night. They don't look like they play in the same league as like the Patriots offensive line. Like if it was Vidarian Lowe right here and I was Jordan Mailata. Now listen, Phil's in incredible shape, which is why he wears the schmedium.
This is why, yeah, this is why we brought you on the show.
I'm just
Yep,
telling
keep going.
You, still though, if we were both offensive linemen, okay, who would you feel better about? I'm Jordan Mailata. Phil is Vidarian Lowe. That's basically what it looked like. And Vidarian Lowe's like a good kid. He was doing the best he could.
Yes.
But he's not a guy that should be starting at left tackle in the NFL.
Do you think you can put that together in one off season? Like, could they go out and buy an offensive line? And how hard is it, as somebody who's played the position, for a group like that to come together in one off season where they can do a competent job protecting a young quarterback?
Well, so that is highly the impact is on the offensive line coach. As far as, yes, I think it's been proven time and again, you can have a competent offensive line, not dominant. I say this all the time. You don't need to have like all pro or Pro Bowl guys. You just can't have guys that are below average that are the reason why you lose. If you go back and you look at a lot of the Patriots' good offensive lines, it's not like they had a bunch of guys that were making the Pro Bowl every year. You know, I mean, you think about Copen or Steve Neal, Matt Light made some Pro Bowls, was a really good player.
Ryan Wendell, Dan Connolly. Yeah.
It's a great point. Like, you just need guys that are good enough. Like I always say, I'd rather have 5 average O-linemen than 3 above average and 2 below average. Because the 2 below average, you're going to kind of fall to the weakest link.
Did you cross paths with Doug Marrone at any point?
No, I didn't. I know Doug.
Yes.
I've talked with him.
Okay.
But we were never on the same team. Well, first of all, he's like an old school guy.
So can you get away with being that in today's game? Because that's what I did want to ask you. As somebody who clearly got coached hard over the course of your career, and knowing that
Dante
these guys...
Scarnecchia?
Dante's a friend of the podcast, friend of the program. He's
incredible.
Unbelievable, but coached you hard.
Oh
and
my
can
gosh,
you get away with that now?
Dante would say things to you on the field that would make you think he hated your guts. And then after practice, he'd ask like how your wife was. Like, it was the craziest thing. He had like that military background in him. I think, to answer your question, I think at offensive line you still can.
Okay.
I think there's probably some other position groups where the old school would not be easy, but offensive line, I still think you can get it done.
Last question I want to ask you, because this is our Jumbo Gumbo portion of the program here.
Nice.
All of our guests, we're having them reach into our Jumbo Gumbo pot with a ladle. You're going to pull out a football with a corresponding, wow, Boston accent just came out real hard there. What number do you have there in the football, Ross?
43.
43. Question number 43 is non-football related. Favorite non-active athlete, favorite retired athlete, or deceased, for all that matter.
Okay.
So
and this
what do you
does
got?
not include me, obviously. Has to be someone other than myself.
You're sounding a little bit like 11th grade Ross Tucker about to ask yourself why you were so great.
That is easy. My favorite football player ever, Randall Cunningham.
Oh, that's
so I grew up outside of Philadelphia, and that was my heyday as a fan. Was Randall's heyday as a player. For people that might not remember him, I mean, he was like Michael Vick and Lamar Jackson, all these guys, when he was the only one like that.
Right.
You know, the only guy doing the stuff he was doing. Absolutely incredible. Loved him. Randall Cunningham, that's an easy answer.
I love that one. I remember playing Joe Montana football as a kid on my computer and using Randall Cunningham and the Eagles because he was so dominant, absolute cheat code. Dominant interview by Ross Tucker here, myfrontpagestory.com.
Yes,
go
all your
check it
wildest
out.
dreams will come true.
Get it for Valentine's Day. Your significant other will love you for it. Ross, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks, Phil.
Great stuff there from both Thomas and from Ross. I find it really interesting just to hear Ross's perspective on the offensive line because he covers the Philadelphia Eagles so closely. Not only is he from that area, big Randall Cunningham fan, but he does their preseason games. And so while he covers the entire league, while he is really focused on all 32, he's really focused in on the Eagles, and he has seen them operate at a very high level on the offensive line, and he's seen what that's done for their team. But he would acknowledge you don't have to be that good to be a contending football team. You just have to be competent. You have to get back to average. And so those names that maybe aren't at the top of the list in terms of available free agents at tackle, at guard, maybe you should move your way down 2, 3, 4, 5 names and get the guys that are fringe starters or that would be starters if not for a really good player ahead of them on the depth chart with whichever team they are playing for right now. Those are the kinds of names that maybe we should be getting a little bit more familiar with as we get closer and closer to free agency. And I feel like this is probably the podcast for that. So we're going to dig into some of those names for you. We'll highlight them as the process of free agency and signing these players draws nearer. But great stuff there from Ross and from Thomas. Appreciate those guys for being on with us. Appreciate you for listening. If you could, please, 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 as always, rate, comment, subscribe if you haven't already. Please, 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 subscribe if you haven't already on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube. Hit that subscribe button, hit that thumbs up button, leave us a comment. We got people singing here on Radio Row. It is brutal. They've been doing it all week. We are going to start talking to people because it's becoming a detriment to all around them, and I would say even maybe a bit of a health hazard. I could 100% see John the Skull Crusher Henry just, I don't know, maybe having a seizure in the middle of one of these performances because they are that bad. So, without further ado, because I can't listen to it anymore. We'll say bye to you for now, but keep an eye out for another Next Pats episode. We will drop another one at the end of the week this week as we close out our time here in New Orleans. We have plenty more phenomenal conversations with some brilliant football people. You're going to want to hear those, so keep an eye out for our next Pats on Friday. We'll talk to you then.